Once I was settled in my bunk, a sense of calm finally washed over me, and I drifted off to sleep. It didn't last long, though. I was jolted awake by an announcement blaring over the combs. A troop transport was inbound with new squads aboard. Frank leaned over from his bunk. "Hey," he said, "did you hear? New squads coming in." He let out a short chuckle. Reinforcements. I sat up, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. About a half hour later, there they were, standing in the doorway, looking a bit lost. Frank pointed them in the right direction. "Find an empty bunk. Anything without a name at the foot is free." They scattered, claiming their new spots. Frank looked at me. "What do you think?" he asked quietly. "Either they're replacing the units we lost, or the Admiral expects a lot more ground assaults in our future." Frank laughed and said they looked so lost and confused. I just smiled and replied, "Yeah, we had that same look not too long ago." He had to agree with that. After the last of the new squads filed past, the parade finally ended. I got up and found a seat at one of the tables in the bunk room, just trying to take it all in. A moment later, the squad leader walked in and introduced himself. Then he dropped a bombshell. Everyone inside this bunkhouse is now one squad. Frank and I shot a look at each other, then glanced around at all the faces. Frank spoke up, "Sir, that's over 40 of us." The squad leader just nodded his head and said, "Yeah, you can do math. That's a full load on a dropship, so get used to it. Now start meeting everyone." Just as he was walking out, he stopped, looked back, and told us we needed a proper unit name, something better than just Second Squad. He mentioned a new mission was on the horizon, so we had to be ready. We all just looked at each other and nodded. He told us to get some rest and instructed the new guys to stow their gear, grab some food, and be ready to move when the call came. Frank and I got up and prepped our gear while the new members headed for the mess hall. After that, we went to the armory for some quick repairs on our armored suits. Suddenly, the XO's voice boomed over the loudspeaker. A battle was raging in a nearby solar system. A patrol fleet was taking heavy casualties, and a troop transport had been hit, crashing on a moon. We didn't know if it was the Ramarsi or pirates, but we were going in. Our mission, rescue the survivors. He said, "Bring everyone home, dead or alive. We will all come home." Then we heard it. The announcement for the fleet to stand by for the jump. A cascade of confirmations crackled over the comms, ship after ship reporting ready status. One by one, they tore through space-time, arriving in the heart of the battle. We moved fast, wrestling into our armored suits, the cold metal a familiar comfort. We scrambled into the dropships, securing ourselves for the descent. Blind in our metal shell, we waited. Over the radio, we could hear the fleet maneuvering, the captains barking orders, the symphony of war beginning. We couldn't see a thing, but we could feel it. The whole ship shuddered and groaned, protesting the enemy's relentless onslaught. We were in the thick of it, no doubt about that. The real fight was about to begin. The air in the drop bay was thick with tension. It was only our second battle together, and you could feel it. Frank and Andrea were getting antsy, pacing back and forth. Why are we still waiting? When do we launch? The sergeant, cool as ever, just told them to calm down. We're maneuvering closer to the moon for a better launch vector. We'll go soon. Just as he said that, the heavy rear ramp hissed shut with a deafening thud, and the entire ship began to vibrate. We were moving. I caught Frank's eye and nodded. "See? We're on our way." We shuffled along the pylons toward the exterior of the ship. As our pods locked into place on the outside, the battle became real. We were exposed, feeling every jolt and explosion as our dropship bounced and shuddered through the chaos. The radio crackled with bad news. Other dropships were stuck, wedged onto the pylons, unable to launch. I saw the worry etched on the sergeant's face, as he yelled at our pilot, "Launch, damn it, launch." The pilot acknowledged, and with a jolt, we were released. We fell for a heart-stopping moment before the engines kicked in, propelling us toward the moon's surface. More horrifying chatter came through the radio. Some ships were being destroyed right on their launch pylons. The descent was pure chaos. We heard other pilots' voices, then sudden, deafening silence. We knew what that meant. We slammed onto the surface, the ramp dropped, and we poured out. I glanced up, and the sky was a terrifying, beautiful fireworks display of explosions and cannon fire. It was both awe-inspiring and the scariest thing I had ever seen. We found the crash site and started pushing toward it. Debris was raining down all around us, but we kept going. It was tough work. The low gravity made every step a struggle. When we finally reached the craft, the sergeant ordered us to connect the oxygen cylinder and get the door open. 2 of us hooked up the O2, while the rest worked on popping the hatch. I glanced back, and my heart sank. Only half the drop ships made it. 60 launched, but only 30 were here on the surface. I asked the sergeant, "How many are on this transport?" He looked at me, his face grim, and said, "Over 1,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. 1,000 souls. How could we possibly get them all out through this hell storm raining down from orbit? The sergeant's voice snapped me out of it. "Keep working." We finally pried the exterior door open, and he sent a couple of techs inside. The real work had just begun. With the door closed and secured, Frank couldn't help but ask what was going on. The sergeant turned to us, his face grim. He explained that they needed to rework the door's internal mechanisms. One wrong move, one misplaced wire, and the inner door could blast open, instantly killing everyone inside. A cold understanding washed over us. We immediately backed away from the craft, giving them space. The sergeant's eyes scanned the area. Then he pointed to 4 squad members from another unit. He ordered them to head back to our dropship, pull out the 2 large cases, and bring them over. Without hesitation, they sprinted off, returning moments later, hauling the heavy cases back to the sergeant. We all watched, wondering what could possibly be inside. Seeing a bunch of strange cases, Andrea couldn't help but ask, "Sarge, what are those for?" The sergeant, without missing a beat, explained they were temporary suits. "If you don't have a suit, or if yours gets damaged," he said, his voice calm, "you put one of these on. They're designed specifically for a quick escape into space." We all just nodded, pretending we totally grasped the life-or-death situation he was describing. Just then, a voice from the techs crackled through. "Exterior door is open. You're clear to go." The sergeant gave the order, "Grab the cases." We shuffled into the vestibule, a tight squeeze with all the gear. The heavy exterior door clanged shut behind us, and we stood in silence, waiting for the pressure to equalize. Finally, with a hiss, the interior door slid open, revealing what was next. As we walked in, it was just a scene of pure chaos. Humanity crammed into a single space. You could see the injured, you could see the dead, and then there were the ones just sitting there, completely shell-shocked, gasping for air. The sergeant didn't waste a second. He just yelled, "Start helping," and we got to work. We moved from person to person, checking for signs of life, trying to offer what little comfort we could. The sergeant was already prying open crates, pulling out temp suits, and handing them to anyone who could stand. Slowly, so slowly, people started moving. They shuffled out of the wrecked ship and into the open. Outside, the other rifle squads had formed a human chain, guiding everyone toward the waiting dropships. We were all rushing, because debris from the battle was still raining down from the sky. Every second counted. Hull fragments started raining down, and a couple of our dropships got hit by the debris. The sergeant was screaming at us, "Faster! Move it, or we're all dead." That lit a fire under us. We started working like mad, shoving people into suits, getting them out the door. As soon as the last of the injured were on their way up and those ships were clear, we finally got a second to breathe. Just a minute, maybe two. Then, the next wave of fresh dropships descended. It was time for round two. We started herding the uninjured civilians, pushing them onto the ramps. Once those ships were packed to capacity, they lifted off, leaving us behind in the chaos. We watched them go, just hoping we'd be next. The sergeant looked at us and said, "Now the dead. Suit them up, and we'll be out of here." So we suited up our fallen comrades and laid them on the floor. The sergeant did a final check of the craft, making sure everyone was out. Then he got a call on the radio, inbound dropships. We immediately started carrying the dead out onto the moon's surface, watching as the rescue ships came in for a landing. Once the tech shut down the first ship and vented the atmosphere, we all scrambled aboard. We secured the dead, locked ourselves in, and waited. Finally, we felt the ship rumble as it began to lift off. The sergeant was talking to the pilot and announced, "We have to move around the moon. The battle has intensified. We'll be skimming the surface. It's going to get dicey." I just took a deep breath and waited. The ship rocked and swayed, a constant jarring motion. I could feel every lurch as the pilot dodged debris on the moon's surface. Finally, we lifted off. For a blissful moment, the ride smoothed out, and I managed to take a deep, shuddering breath. But that peace was shattered almost immediately. Explosions blossomed around us, the ship bucking wildly as we evaded cannon fire. The metallic tongue of fear filled the air. After what felt like an eternity of this chaotic dance, the pilot's voice crackled over the intercom, strained but firm. "Hold on. We're coming in hot for a combat landing in the hangar bay. It's too dicey for a pylon lock." My knuckles turned white as I gripped my seat, bracing for impact. This was going to be rough. The massive landing bay doors groaned open, revealing the cavernous belly of the carrier. Our dropship shuddered as it descended, touching down on the bay floor with a heavy bounce that rattled our teeth. 1, 2, 3 jolts, and then we were still. "Hold tight," the pilot's voice crackled over the coms, lowering to the main hangar now. The platform beneath us hummed, and we began our slow descent into the brightly lit hangar. Once we were down, a tractor beam pulled us smoothly off the lift and into a designated parking stall. With a final hiss, the ramp lowered. The ground crew swarmed in immediately, their faces grim as they began their solemn work, carefully carrying our fallen comrades from the craft. We unlatched our helmets, the stale, recycled air of the ship replaced by the familiar scent of oil and ozone. A collective sigh of relief washed over us. It was over. We were home. We stepped out of the dropship, and the sergeant looked us dead in the eye. "You did a damn good job," he said. We just nodded and headed for the armory. After peeling off our armored suits, we made our way back to the bunk room. But as we turned into the corridor, something stopped us. A group of crew members, just standing there, started clapping. They were cheering for us. They knew we'd risked everything to save those soldiers on the troop transport. We just stood there, completely taken aback, not sure what to do. I managed to smile and thank them before we continued on to our room. Some guys hit the showers right away. Others just collapsed onto their bunks, staring at nothing. We didn't talk. We just kept to ourselves for a while, letting it all sink in. Frank walked out of the locker room and looked at me, saying he was hungry again. I just smiled and told him he eats way too much. He grinned and threw his towel at me, telling me to get cleaned up so we could head to the mess hall. I got up and headed into the locker room. When I came back out, for a second, I'd forgotten we were still in the middle of a battle. The Hades was maneuvering back into the fight, and our cheerful mood just vanished. We sat down as the ship shuddered from enemy fire hitting the hull. Then we heard our own cannons roar, shaking the deck plates beneath us. The loudspeaker announced ships going down, but the enemy was taking heavy losses too. The ship yawed hard onto its side, then climbed before righting itself, only to yaw to the other side as our cannons fired again and again. I walked over to the terminal, embedded in the wall, and stared at the battle screen. Our fleet was positioned directly on top of the Ramarsi, firing down into their formation. It was a perfect tactical advantage. Suddenly, a voice crackled over the loudspeaker, announcing inbound jump points. A knot of dread formed in my stomach. Were more enemy ships arriving? Was this the end for us? I quickly looked back at the terminal screen, my heart pounding. Relief washed over me as the IFF tags identified the new arrivals. Kaelum Guard ships. The Fourth Fleet had arrived. Freshly out of dry dock from a major retrofit, they were specifically upgraded to fight the Ramarsi. They were a much larger fleet than ours, and as their weapon ports opened, they unleashed absolute hell onto the helpless Ramarsi ships below. The tide of the battle had just turned. With overwhelming firepower, the Ramarsi ships began to jump away. We had won the battle for the day. The very last Ramarsi ship tried to make the jump, but one of our battleships fired one more time, disabling its jump drive completely. In that instant, all our remaining battleships pounced on it, unleashing a final devastating barrage that tore the ship apart. We had won the day. Frank looked over at me, his expression unreadable. Okay, let's go to the mess hall. After a quiet meal, we headed back to the bunk room where the rest of the squad was waiting. Andrea walked up to us immediately. Where were you two? Frank just said, the mess hall. She rolled her eyes. Just then, the Admiral's voice boomed over the loudspeaker, requesting a fleet-wide sitrep. Each ship checked in, reporting their damage. The Admiral then ordered damage control teams from ships with minor damage to transfer to those that were hit hard. The next few days were a blur of organized chaos. We were stuck in system while the fleet licked its wounds. Ships were getting patched up just enough to make the jump to a proper space dock for the real heavy lifting repairs. Meanwhile, supply ships started rolling in, a welcome sight for everyone. They brought everything we were running low on. A couple of medical frigates also showed up to take the soldiers we de-rescued from that troop transport. The whole ship was buzzing with activity crews restocking, welding, and just trying to keep things running. To stay out of the way, my team and I mostly stuck to our bunk room, or the armory. We spent the time cleaning our gear, making our own repairs, and just getting organized. It was surprisingly calm, almost boring, but we knew it wouldn't last. The Admiral extended the repair schedule by another day. Restocking was taking longer than planned. The medical frigates jumped out, heading for Orion Station to get those soldiers the care they needed. After replenishment, the Admiral demanded another sitrep. It took a while, but all ships reported they were jump-worthy. The Third Fleet, battered from the last fight, had to jump back to the space dock for major repairs. That left us, the Second Fleet, and the Fourth Fleet. Our orders? Jump several systems away to rendezvous with the Seventh Fleet. Apparently, they found a massive Ramarsi ship encampment hidden deep inside an asteroid belt. For once, the Council wants us on the offensive, tired of always being on the back foot. The Admiral ordered all ground troops to gear up. We might be boarding their ships. Our fleet began the jump, arriving behind a gas giant where the Seventh was waiting. With two admirals on the scene, they met on the Hades to hash out a plan. It took hours, but they finally have a strategy, and soon we'll all know our part in the attack. All right, here's the battle plan. Listen up. We're going to hit them with a classic pincer movement, but with a twist. The Second Fleet, our smallest but bravest, is going to charge straight at them. Head on. Their job is to be the bait, to draw all the enemy's attention and fire. While the enemy is distracted, the Seventh and Fourth Fleets will make a jump, appearing right behind their formation. They'll weave through the asteroid field, using the rocks for cover, and start hitting them from the rear. Now, the asteroids are a double-edged sword. They give us cover, but they also make it tricky to line up those perfect shots. But that's the genius of it. With the second fleet charging them down, we're counting on the enemy to panic, to get angry, and swarm out of the asteroid field like a stirred-up hornet's nest. And when they do, they'll be perfectly exposed for all three fleets to tear them apart. Let's get it done. The XO's voice boomed over the ship-wide comms. Set condition 1 throughout the ship. All hands to battle stations. Prepare for jump to the Prothean system. One by one, every ship in the combined fleets reported ready. The jump began. It took over an hour for all of us to transition, but we made it, emerging behind the massive gas giant. The 7th Fleet was already in perfect formation, with the 2nd and 4th quickly falling in line. The 2nd Fleet peeled off, executing a hard burn around the planet, heading straight for the Ramarsi fleet hiding in the asteroid field. Our battleships scanned, locking onto targets. Some were docked with asteroids, others just floating in the void. The Admiral's command was simple. All ships, open fire. We unleashed hell. Beams and projectiles tore into the asteroid field. Some hit, some missed, but we definitely got their attention. They swarmed out like angry hornets, but we got another massive volley off, and their ships started to explode. Then they returned fire. Our ship, the Hades, shuddered as it took a hit, groaning under the strain. But we held our course, firing relentlessly, heading straight for them. The Admiral's voice crackled over the comms, ordering the 7th and 4th fleets to jump. They warped to the far side of the asteroid belt, right behind the enemy. We watched as they masterfully weaved through the asteroids, positioning themselves for a devastating pincer attack. Then they opened fire. The enemy fleet was thrown into chaos. It was a new tactic they were completely unprepared for. In a panic, some of their ships tried to jump away, only to explode in massive balls of energy, taking others with them. The rest charged in a desperate last stand. With the combined might of 3 fleets, we cut them down quickly. The last enemy ships either blew up or self-destructed, choosing destruction over capture. It was exhilarating. We finally dealt a massive blow to their morale and proved we can win. We have to keep the pressure on. The battle was finally over. The XO immediately set the fleet to condition 2, ready stand, while the admirals called for a sitrep of all ships, which I knew would take a while. I found myself drawn to a viewport. I just stared out at the wreckage of the Ramarsi fleet. The debris field was massive, a ghost of what it once was. Every so often, a piece would drift into our hull, and I'd hear this dull thud echo through the corridor. Thud. It was mesmerizing in a strange, haunting way. I was lost in the sight when the sergeant came walking down the hall. He saw me, walked up, and stood beside me in silence for a moment. Then he just said, "What a sight to see, all those ships destroyed." I asked him how many there were. He looked out into the void. "Around a couple of thousand," he said. "A couple of thousand." I nodded in agreement. He told me he was heading to the bridge. The admirals were gathering to hash out their next move. Apparently, word was spreading fast. The 20th Fleet is rolling out of dry dock, fully upgraded and ready for action. Their first assignment? Patrolling the gamma ray system. The Council also made a big decision. They're keeping the 2nd and 4th Fleets together. Not only that, but the 2nd Fleet is getting a serious boost. Several ships from the 3rd Fleet, freshly repaired from their last engagement, are being reassigned to them. With this new structure, these 2 fleets are about to become a formidable wolf pack, hunting together. Big things are happening, and it feels like the tide is about to turn. The moment one of our fleets gets hit, or even spots the Ramarsi, we're jumping in. The plan is simple. Overwhelm them with sheer numbers and start taking down their ships, one by one. We need to turn the tide of this war. I've also heard we're getting more troop transports, each one carrying 10,000 soldiers. It feels like they're gearing up for ground campaigns. But for now, that's just a rumor floating around the mess hall. As I stood there, looking out the viewport, all I could see was the aftermath, a sea of debris against the backdrop of a massive asteroid belt. Beyond that, distant stars cast this brilliant, almost haunting, blue light over everything. It's a strange, beautiful, and terrifying sight all at once. What will tomorrow bring? It's just amazing out here, staring into the endless black. But even with all this beauty, I can't help thinking about everyone back home. It should be Halloween in a week or two, right? Then Thanksgiving will be just around the corner. I wonder what they're all doing, how they are. Lost in my thoughts, the XO's voice suddenly boomed over the loudspeaker, breaking my concentration. I snapped back to reality and listened. The XO ordered the entire fleet to stand by for a jump to the Sega-9 system. Apparently, some heavy fighting broke out with the 32nd Fleet. They'd requested the Wolf Pack to jump in and overwhelm the enemy. One by one, all ships reported ready. Then, the familiar lurch as we began the jump, hurtling towards the next battle. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Phantom Static, where the phantoms speak through the static.